Hola, amiga. Welcome to the Latina Leadership Podcast, a podcast by Latinas for all women. Get ready because today's conversation is really special. Hola, amigas. Welcome back to the Latina Leadership Podcast. Oh my God, season 12 is finally here. Oh my God. And honestly, I'm cozied up in my room, chilling on my bed with Sugar, who's already judging me, like always. Yes, it's been quite a week. It's been the holiday season, and Sugar's already being dramatic because he wants his little holiday feast. He's a little chunky, guys. I'm sorry. Oh, he didn't like that comment. Pero I'm so excited to kick things off with you. For anyone new, I'm Andrea, your co-host, and this season, it's just me. Sorry, guys. Intimate, relaxed, and real. Yes, this season is all about you, your story, your voice, your journey. We've been talking about share your story all over social, and the reason is because our comunidad is the heart of the podcast. And I truly believe one story can inspire hundreds of others. So, what is the topic today, guys? Today is Latina leadership. Wow, kind of on the nose, Andrea. Yes, it kind of is on the nose. But what about Latina leadership today? So, a little context before we dive in. I've been thinking a lot about what Latina leadership looks like right now. And honestly, amigas, it's evolving. We're not entering spaces quietly anymore. We're walking in with a whole lot of heart, purpose, and courage. But let me be real. Being a Latina leader isn't just about titles. It's about navigating systems that weren't built with us in mind, balancing identities, and still showing up. We know the reality. Latinas are still massively underrepresented in leadership roles. Only 1% of C-suite roles across corporate America belong to Latinas. And at that first step up to manager, there is the broken rung, a new term, where so many of us are stuck. But even with all that, we're out here driving economic growth, building businesses, running for office, and leading our families and communities. So, if you know a little bit about me, I love going to Houston markets, especially right now in the holiday season. And, I love talking to a lot of the local vendors. And that got me thinking about a lot of leadership. A lot of them, especially a lot of them are Latinas, because we have a lot of Latina markets here. I'm going to be honest with you guys. A lot of them, talking to them, a lot of them stepped up. And a lot of them stepped up to, be the breadwinner for their families and own their own businesses. And just hearing their stories and hearing what they've done and building their own businesses. Oh, she goes like, I want to run away, mommy. I want to run away. No. You get to hear the story from mommy. Like a lot of them hearing their stories really got me thinking about them stepping in as leaders and stepping into their roles, and got me thinking about, man, stepping into this stuff, especially for them. A lot of them was recent small business owners, got me thinking about this new age of Latina leadership, and that kind of where it got me going for this episode of Latina leadership, and what all kind of goes into becoming a Latina leader. So that's kind of got the ball rolling for this episode specifically. And especially, especially my sister right now too. Another thing too. My parents have recently went out of the country. My mom's from Salvador. So they went out of the country, and then I'm the youngest out of my family. So my older sister kind of stepped in, and my parents' car broke down, and she kind of stepped in and helped out the car fixed up and everything, and stepped into that role of leadership. So I was like, leadership is the main theme. So that's been the revolving thing so far. So kind of like, I was like, like this episode needs to revolve over this. So that's kind of where this episode kind of came from a little bit. Hey, but like also Latina Leadership Podcast, of course. But yeah, that's where this kind of came from, where it's kind of been evolving in my life. So that's why I was like, let me add that little tidbit here before Sugar plans his grand escape. Going into a little personal story, you know? When I think about Latina leadership, you know, I think about my family. You know, as I mentioned previously, my mom, she's from Salvador, and you know, she immigrated from El Salvador, you know, raising us with so much love, even when money, you know, was tight. And my sister, she was the first to graduate, becoming a molecular technologist and showing me what resilience looks like. These are the women who shaped my idea of leadership. You know, growing up, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know what I was gonna do. I really didn't. My dad was like super into agriculture, so did a little bit of that. I love animals, as you can tell, holding my little sugar here. So I did a little bit of veterinary here and there. I took psychology, took government, like I was interested in politics at some point. Like I've been interested in a lot of stuff, but I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And my mom gave me advice, like, Andrea, if you want to do something, quédate con verdad a ti misma. Like, stay true to yourself. And I kind of stuck with that throughout my whole career, like through my internships, through my college career, kind of stuck with that. And I feel like that has helped me overall develop myself as a person, like staying true to myself and looking at what example my mom has set for me, and you know what my sister has set for me too. That kind of helped me build out who I am as a person. And I feel like in the career there, Sugar has said his grand escape has set me true to myself. And you know, I feel like where I'm at now, I'm kind of where like I wanted to be, like where I've been true to myself. I've found a community. I've felt where I can be who I want to be. And my sister said sometimes you're a little too authentic, but I feel like that's where you gotta dabble, right? But yeah, I feel like I always give that advice to people, like find somewhere where you can be kind of true to yourself. And that's the advice I kind of leave you with this personal story of mine. So, amigas, why did we change the focus of this season? Why on storytelling? Why did we change the format? Lots of questions. Porque our stories are how we connect, right, Sugar? That's how we connect, right, Sugar? Maybe you've rebuilt after a huge setback. Maybe you're navigating motherhood and career. Maybe you finally found your voice after years of staying quiet. Those stories deserve space. And this season, you're not just listeners, you're contributors. You can send your story through text, audio, and video, and it resonates. We'll weave it into an episode. Imagine hearing your voice replayed to thousands who suddenly feel seen because of you. You know, during these last few weeks where we've been getting y'all to share your stories, it's been so impactful. Going through, sending messages, encouraging y'all like, hey, send your story, or like receiving the messages and being like, thank you for putting yourself out there and sending your story. And reading through these impactful stories of resilience, of going through a lot, and the fact that you're able to send that story and you being willing for me to read it out is just, oh my God, like, thank you for really putting yourself out there, because I know it's gonna be hard to, you know, have your story be, you know, voiced out. But I know that your story is going to have so much impact, and it's going to motivate somebody else to want their story to be heard. Be like, hey, that person put themselves out there to have their story heard. I want my story heard. Let me send my story out. And know that we're so grateful for everyone who has taken that initiative. And if you haven't, don't worry. The submissions, they're not closing. We're gonna keep taking submissions throughout all of season 12. And let's say your story isn't featured in an episode, we're gonna keep finding ways to feature those stories, be it in socials or whatever other format. We're gonna find a way to have your voice heard, all right? So thank you everyone who's taking that initiative, and just keep starting those conversations, keep having your voice out there. Because we're just opening that space up for y'all, but we're gonna continue keeping that push to have your voice being heard. And I know y'all have been wondering, like, Andrea, why did y'all change the format from interviews? This is just allows us a little more leeway to have more voices and more stories be heard. Because like with the interviews, it's nicer, you know, and like you have like a one-on-one with a person, yes. But with the stories, it just allows more voices to be heard, and more stories to be told. So that's kind of the reason we kind of shifted from that. And I hope y'all enjoyed this shift. Obviously, this is a big test for the podcast to shift from transitioning from that format to this new format. And I know it's also y'all putting a lot of trust on us to, you know, do that. And we take full responsibility on that. And I hope we are able to deliver on that. I know it's a lot of responsibility also on my part too. But yes, I will do my best to have y'all voices heard. So thank you so much for that. And on to the next part, amigas. Finding your voice. Yes, because voice is so important for leadership. So let's talk about finding your voice, because that is the foundation of leadership. Many of us grew up being told, be humble, don't be too loud, let others speak first. Sound familiar? My mom would tell me, habla con tu corazón, but actually doing that, it took years, and honestly, I'm still practicing. And there's moments where I still hesitate to speak up, especially like, you know, knowing, if y'all know me, I have a pretty direct personality. I have a pretty direct personality that can sometimes be hard to, you know, not control, but like, you know, get used to. So, you know, we're in holiday season, so there's a lot of shopping going on that I'm doing. And so, not to put too many details out there, but, you know, I'm shopping, go to a retail store and stuff, and I'm waiting in line. And so, I'm almost there at the register, and I see a customer being angry with a cashier. And this cashier looks really, really young. And just for a bit of background, when I was in high school, I worked retail. And I also was a cashier. And so this cashier looked really, really young. And the person was mad at them. Like, I think it was they were older lady. And so I was like, man, should I step up? Because I've been there. Like, I've been there in a situation where, like, customer was getting angry at me, and I was panicking because, like, I'm yelling. I'm here like, man, like, where's the manager? Manager's in the back. And I'm, like, radioing them. I'm like, bro, like, hey, like, there's, like, lady being mad. Like, I'm gonna need you to come up here. And, like, I'm panicking. And so I put myself back in that situation. I'm like, should I step up? Like, I'm hesitating. And so I'm like, you know, having flashbacks to that. And so I'm like, should I step up? And I see, like, you know, this poor kid going through the same thing. And so I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna step up and speak up. So I go up and I'm like, and I, you know, in these type of situations, you want to be as calm as possible. And so I go up, I speak up. I'm like, hey, there seems to be a situation. Do you need me to get a manager involved? I don't work here, but I just want to make sure, like, if everything's good. And the worker is like, and the person gets mad at me, like, no, the worker can handle it. I'm like, and I answered, like, the worker seems like they've done all they could. Do you want to, instead of taking it out on them, do you want to speak to a manager instead of taking it out on this poor person? And so that gives the worker time to, go get the manager comes, situation gets solved, and the worker, thank you for like handling that, and stepping in. I know you didn't need to. And I was like, no, I've been in that situation where like, you're young, and like I was young at the same age too, and like nobody stepped up for me. And it's just finding those times where you can step up, right? Where you can speak up and find your voice, and from that lived experience, right? And it's hard. Like should I be involved in a situation? Should I not? Right? It's hard to put yourself in those spaces, right? So let's go into a few ways we can find our voice, because it is hard to find. And I, obviously you got to read the situation where you can step up. But here are a few ways you can find your voice. So first, recognize your story. Recognize where your story matters. Especially you saw how I recognized my story there by going back to when I worked in retail, and where I saw like, hey, my retail experience mattered in that situation. I felt back and like, hey, I worked retail and I've been there, and I don't want somebody to go through that same experience that I had gone through before. And it's hard to recognize that your story matters. Like, I recognized that my story mattered in that situation because, hey, I worked retail, and that lived experience matters to me. I don't want somebody to go, especially people who are young, I don't want them to go through the same experience that I did when I worked retail. I don't want them to be traumatized by the same stuff I went through when I worked retail. So that's at least from my lived experience. I don't want them to go through that. So know that, your story is not perfect, but it's a real experience, and recognize that. So another one is practice speaking up in small ways. So how I did it probably was a big way for many people, but this could be small ways, such as a group chat, whoa, new technology, a meeting, even posting your opinion on Instagram. It could be things like that. It can be, and that's small things. It doesn't have to be a situation, as I demonstrated in my example. It could be through text, and we're just gonna show you room himself. Okay, cool. Surround yourself with people who lift you. Don't surround yourself with negative Nancys. People who lift you could be like mentors, tías, primas, amigas. Anyone who reminds you you're not crazy for wanting more. I saw that like in this new age, some people like surround themselves with haters. Look, I want to joke around that if I don't got haters, I'm not successful. I'm not being successful. But there's a different thing by actually surrounding yourself with haters, okay? Like, that's a different thing, all right? My goal for y'all is surrounding yourself with people who appreciate your opinion. They're not telling you to shut up and like, girl, who cares? No, people who are like, yeah, girl, speak your truth. Yes, tell me more. Surround yourself with people like that. Don't surround yourself with people who tell you to shut up, please. Start the new year positive, please, guys. And be yourself. Authenticity hits different. One thing you gotta know about me, Andrea, is that I'm a nonconformist. By the buy my jewelry, buy my plushies here, my F1 helmets, and my portraits. You'll know I like what I like, and I'm unapologetic about it. And that's one thing about authenticity. You gotta be yourself. You gotta be yourself, and you can't let anyone downplay what you like. They'll be like, you like that? You can't let people downplay your own opinion, what you like. You gotta stand on business, like what you like, and be proud about it, And that's one thing people like about authenticity. They like people who are like, yeah, I like that, and what about it? So stand on that and be yourself. All right, now we're getting in the juicy part of it. Into heritage, the juicier part of what we get in talking about leadership. So let's get into it. Now, because being Latina is part of our power. So, as background, I think I've already mentioned it before, my mom is from El Salvador. She's Salvadoran. And my dad is Mexican. So, growing up in Houston, H-Town, hold it down, I always felt like I lived in two worlds. I know a lot of y'all felt this. English at school, Spanish at home, and sometimes Spanglish everywhere. But here's what I've learned. You don't have to choose. You get to be both. And that mix, that blend, makes you powerful. Our heritage gives us resilience, authenticity, innovation. It's the reason we lead with corazón and community. And I bring up so many memories from my youth. I remember being so confused when I was young of English and Spanish. I remember calling up my grandma. When you're young, your parents pass you your grandma on the phone, and you're just like, huh, who is this? And talking to her in English, even though she didn't understand English at that point. I didn't know she didn't understand English, but that's the one thing I knew from school, so I talked to her in English, right? And just trying to figure out who I was and who speaks what language and what culture and what's everything, right? And growing up and feeling connected to my heritage and finally finding connections and understanding. And then, once you grow up and you start talking to other people, even from different cultures, you start to realize, oh, y'all have similar experiences too. And it's so funny having those conversations too with people from different cultures too. Y'all had those type of experiences too? That's crazy. And it's just having those conversations and being proud of your heritage too. And you're just realize, damn, we had similar experiences too. And having that similar pride too, and having that similar resilience and similar authenticity, you're just like, wow, we've come full circle. And yeah, I just always find when we talk about heritage, it's sometimes such a similar experience across multiple cultures. So open yourself up to that conversation, especially not just, Hispanic heritage, but heritage across different cultures, because sometimes you'll realize, man, we're really similar. Open up that conversation. Okay, so now we've gotten into the big juicer of heritage. So what are the practical ways you can lean into your heritage? First, know your story. But Andrea, what do you mean by know your story? I mean, what are your little tidbits that you tell people about your story? What are those? Little bits about your childhood, little bits that mean you, right? That's what I mean by know your story. Second, bring your cultural lens into your work. What are parts of your culture that define you, that define your style of work? That's what I'm meaning. Third, celebrate your culture. There's no shame in celebrating your culture. Come on. You celebrate your culture, motivates people to celebrate their culture. Comes full circle. And talking about full circle, fourth, mentor others by sharing your experience. When people see you're sharing your experience, they share their experience. It's as I said, it's a full circle thing. When I've shared my experience about my culture, people share their experience. They're like, man, you're sharing your experience? And I'm going to share my experience. It's a full circle thing. So don't feel intimidated and share your experience. It's like a minor form of mentorship right there. So it just shows people a way for them to feel comfortable and share their cultural experiences and share their heritage. So I encourage you, if you haven't done so already, do it. These are small ways to embrace your heritage. Now, that's the end, a little bit of our episode, but there's so much more to come for this season. All right, amigas. Before you head out, let me give you a little spoiler for what's coming next on the Latina Leadership Podcast. Our next episode is called Owning the Room, Confidence in the New Era. And we are diving all the way into how Latinas are reshaping confidence at work, in media, and in leadership spaces. We're talking tips, real talks, and those little tricks that help you walk into a room like, yup, I belong here. But here's the fun part. You are officially part of the next episode. This is a little separate from like what we've been doing for Share Your Story part, okay? A little separate. This week on our IG and Facebook stories, we're posting questions all about confidence. How you build it, how you protect it, how you hype yourself up when you need that little push. And we're featuring your responses in the episode. So make sure you follow us at Latina Leadership Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Keep an eye out on our stories because I cannot wait to see what you all share. Your tips, your moments, your bold statements, all of it. And yes, I'll be reading them in the next episode, so don't be shy. All right, loves, that's it for today. Stay confident, stay bright, and remember, you don't just enter the room, you set the tone. See you in the next one. Bye. Sugar, I needed to say bye to the viewers. Oi, oi. Oh, he was sleeping. Bye, 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 bye.